Hello, Dave.
Ian.
And hello, Patrick George. Thank you for
David,
coming on our
Ian.
show.
Hello. Thank you for having me, guys. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know, Patrick George is the editorial director for Brookline Media. He's in charge of sites like The Drive, Car Blogs, Task and Purpose, The War Zone. And did I miss anything?
No, but I sadly have to be that guy and correct you. It's Car Bibles, not Car Blogs. They do have Car Blogs. Car Bibles. Oh, yes, of course.
After we had Rosales on, too. Yeah.
I forgive you. It's okay. I'll let it pass this one time. You're fine.
Is it like Attorneys General, Cars Bible? Yeah.
I love using Attorneys General. It's such a great phrase to use. You know, I started my career as a crime reporter. And that's one of my favorite phrases to use is attorneys general. It's so not common, but it's a great construction. Anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about the cars. So I'll move on from that.
Wow, you're a crime reporter. I want to dig into that a bunch, but yeah, that'll be on my true crime podcast that I haven't started yet.
Nice. Yes, yeah. I could give you some. There's a lot we could talk about. Probably I'll need a stiffer drink than the seltzer water I'm drinking right now. Some of that, but yeah.
I'm also hyper squeamish, so I would be afraid to do my own podcast. Yeah. Anyway, Cars Bible.
Yes, we like them. Yes, the Cars Bible.
Cars Bible. Anyway, I think I've wanted to have you on the show for a long time, and I just never figured out the exact questions that I wanted to ask you. But then we had Chris Rosales on, who's one of your writers for
Car Bibles. Thank you. Chris is awesome. Thank you for having him on. What a great guy he is. Love Chris. Yeah,
and we were talking about his article about gentrification was kind of what drew brought him to our attention or whatever. And so we kind of got deep up our butts about that. And it kind of reminded me of a question that I've had for a long time. And I realized that you were the perfect person to talk to about it, which is just sort of where we are in this moment for automotive journalism and kind of car culture in general, but specifically automotive writing. And what I mean by that is obviously, like every other medium, we're going through this big shift towards democratized new media, new voices, and all of that. But there's a lot of nostalgia out there for the bygone era of magazines. And as someone who's kind of right in the middle of that shift, I'm kind of wondering what your kind of opinion is about the state of automotive journalism.
Yeah, no, I definitely have strong thoughts on all of that. Happy to chat about that for sure.
Yeah, so I think the first thing is the thing that kind of ties this to the gentrification thing is it's what is worth preserving. It's a talk about what's worth preserving in the thing that brought us to where we are in the first place versus how do we make it bigger and more accessible to a larger audience and more people. And so I just want to start out by asking you, when you were kind of coming up or reading about cars, what drew you to pick up a car magazine when you were a kid or whatever?
Yeah, no, great question. No, I think I've been into cars as long as I remember. Like a lot of people, I got into this from my dad. My dad's a big car guy. He still is. He owned throughout my youth. My dad's a really great father. He was always a responsible man. Really just did everything he possibly could for his kids and still does. But when he could swing it, he would have something fun. It wasn't all the time, but throughout my childhood, he had a Miata at one point. He had a Corvette Z06, a C5. I learned to drive stick on that car, which when you learn to drive stick on a car like that, you can drive stick on anything afterward. He had an E46 M3 convertible manual for a time. I loved that thing. When I didn't get to drive much, as I was already an adult at that point. But I got a little bit from him, and I got it from other friends of his who were into motorsports. I grew up playing Gran Turismo. I grew up playing Mario Kart, and as soon as I turned 15, I'm 36 now, as of a month ago. So I was still that teenage age where teenagers still care about cars back then. Right. I think they still do today, but it's possibly less pronounced than it was. But meet a bunch of my friends as soon as we were like license eligible. Like we got really into car culture and driving, and what we could modify, what we could do to our cars, how we could wrench on them. And it's no coincidence that I think Fast and the Furious came out when I was either 15 or 16. I was like, holy crap, this is a movie for us. And as absurd as that movie is, it did fuel a lot of the youth car culture at the time. Fast and Furious definitely created an image for a sort of, by that point, bygone era of tuning in Southern California. The fictionalized version of that went mainstream. And I, growing up as a kid in Texas, I sort of went along with it. So how did I get into this? I guess that was just something I remember growing up. I'd always been interested in writing, and I always been interested in journalism. I was on my middle school newspaper staff, on my high school newspaper staff, but I always read car magazines. I loved Automobile. I loved Ezra Dyer. He was my favorite. I loved David E. Davis. I liked Road and Track a lot, and Car and Driver. I sometimes read Motor Trends. I mean, I would just go to my grocery store and just pour through everything, and would buy the magazines that like had the comparison tests or the new car tests that I liked best. Even for stuff I didn't end up buying, like I just still like soaked up all of this knowledge. And between that and playing video games like Gran Turismo 2, it was like the best education you could get. And as somebody who was interested in writing, interested in journalism too, I never really thought I had this career where I would like be in automotive journalism, but I still soaked up all that knowledge. I soaked up all that, like how to do this job and how to tell a story that way, and what it means to test these cars, and what it means to deliver a meaningful buyer's guide to somebody. So that was how I got into it too. And I like I said, I never really expected to be doing this as my job, but I started as a young newspaper reporter in Austin, Texas, and I graduated from college like right around the recession, and work was not great, so I freelanced a lot. And when I wasn't like covering murders for the Austin American Statesman, I freelanced for some automotive ads because this was something I knew, and I could speak authoritatively about it. And it was good money, it helped me pay the bills, and I was a young journalist just starting out. And over time, I was kind of like, I sort of enjoy this more than getting kicked out of bed at 2 a.m. to cover a police shooting. And a part-time gig at Jalopnik turned into a full-time gig. And then within a few years, I was its editor-in-chief. So that's kind of how I got to where I am.
That's amazing. Okay. That's amazing. There's so much like topography to uncover there. Like, I think that like I'm 43, Ian's closer to your age, right? So you in your late 30s, Ian doesn't like to be defined as that, right? But like we were at this era when we were growing up where there was not so much of a digital area for us to escape to, right? So print media was like largely an escape for us, right? Like I loved Car magazine, like all of that stuff. And like, I think it really, the magazines gave me something personally. Like I read comic books. I don't have much of an attention span, right? But like these kind of like smaller, somewhat long form articles that were not books, right? Like could really hold my interest and I could really dive into them, right? And then there was just all the crazy fun stuff that you picked up along the way, right? Mm-hmm. Just like all the odd stats and the video games and like this whole encompassing culture, and now that kids, when they are 15, have this, and way earlier, have this online environment to escape into, right? Like the automotive space of that it's now there for them in a way that like we never had that before, right? Yeah,
totally. No, there was like the best we could do back then was probably the forums, honestly.
Yeah.
And then, I remember in college, I would read Autoblog, I would read Jalopnik, I would read The Truth About Cars during that site's heyday. And I don't know if you guys remember, like there was a time when like all those blogs were kind of feuding at each other. They would just like endlessly snipe at one another too. But you're right, that didn't come along until like the sort of like 2.0 era of the internet. It wasn't really there in the early days of when we all started getting online.
Right. I remember when Autoblog first, like when they got a Rolls Royce press car.
Yeah.
And like that for some reason was just a switch that flipped in my mind that like completely legitimized automotive online journalism. It's not like it needed to be justified to me before, but like if I explained like a car blog to my dad, right? And like he wouldn't quite get it, but if he saw that this car blog got a Rolls Royce press car, like then that would put it on the level of Motor Trend and Popular Mechanics, right?
Right.
Like
right.
yeah, his stuff, yeah.
And I think that the thing that's interesting too is like each one of these jumps that we're talking about, like where like I think automobile was a big deal too, because back in the day that was sort of it was a much less like formal, less like stat driven, more narrative type magazine, right?
No boring cars was their tagline, which today remains a unassailable A+ tagline for an auto publication,
right?
I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that was always my favorite. But then like Fast and the Furious, like, oh, it doesn't look like, the car show that is happening at the malt shop or whatever. And then Top Gear was another big thing where like, as bad as like kind of cringy as like things like the Cool Wall are now.
Yeah.
Where, it's like some of the things that he's saying is like, oh, well, that's terrible.
If I'd add real quick, also, if we're talking about magazines from that era that mattered, we would be derelict in our duties if we did not mention Sport Compact Car.
Oh, yeah.
Which is a magazine that I absolutely loved and worshipped and admired. For a lot of reasons, the fact that like I then as now was not a great mechanic growing up. Like I was not the kid who could like I could do some bolt-ons. I could talk to my friends about horsepower specs and stats and things like that, but I was never like reassembling, a transmission in my driveway when I was 15. In retrospect, I wish I learned to do that. But Sport Compact Car walked that line between like, here's the cool stuff you can affordably maybe buy new, or like if you're a teenager, like when you're out of college, you get a Civic Si, like a Mazda Speed Protege, or the first WRX that came to America. And also it had like the light tuner thing to it, but it mixed the cool storytelling that Automobile had. Like it really spoke to that generation of enthusiasts for about 5 to 8, 10 maybe years straight. It was just like, that was like the place to go. And I'll tell you this too, when my parents moved out of their house into an apartment a couple of years ago, when they were just getting older and didn't want to deal with, the space as parents do, I had this massive stack of Sport Compact Car magazines that like I sold in a garage sale to some kid who drove by. I think he was at a lower protege now that I think about it. I sold him the stack of magazines for like $100, and the minute he drove away, I immediately regretted it. I should have gone after him and just fucking bought it back. But like, yeah, Sport Compact Car, one of the all-time greats, and it deserves. I think that it's unless you're like our age, you don't really remember it as much, but it deserves more than it gets today, I think.
Yeah, no, it's a keystone. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
I think I only read it a handful of times. I was in Michigan when I was a teenager, and so imports were not looked fondly upon. But I do remember reading it every once in a while. I wonder, has it been digitized at all, or is it out there?
I'm sure somebody owns the rights to that brand, but I remember me and my old boss at Jalopnik, Matt Hardigree, used to joke about buying their archives and digitizing them, and just putting out articles on Jalopnik under that banner all the time. It never happened for whatever reason, but like, I wish someone would do right by that archive of stories. I think it's a hell of a time capsule for that era of sports compact cars, which is a segment in and of itself that barely exists anymore,
Yeah. No, it's true.
I think of a red Civic every time I think of Sport Compact Car. Like that red Civic, the iconic like Civic with all the white graphics, like just pops straight into my mind. Like it's so...
You got to remember, they would do these like 10-car shootouts, like the Dodge Neon SRT, the WRX, the Lancer Evo, the Civic Si at the time.
Everything we were playing in Gran Turismo.
Like the Chevy Cobalt SS, just like everybody had like some sort of turbocharged 4-cylinder sedan or coupe at the time with a manual. And most of them were NA until the first WRX came to this country, and then like immediately wiped the floor with everything else. Like the Sentra SCRV spec, like none of those cars exist anymore. It's all crossovers now, like compact crossovers. It sucks.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's so crazy because I've driven most of those cars that you're talking about, like like the Celica GTS is another one.
Yeah,
all of those front wheel drives, sports cars, and I talk to people about those now, and they're just like, "What are you talking about?" Like people have, like even just people my age that don't remember that they existed.
Yeah,
it's so strange.
Yeah, and that was a not only it was a lucrative market at one point, like going after those like recent college grads or like financially empowered like teenagers who are like that just does that market barely exists. I guess there's still the WRX and the Civic Si is really excellent, the current one, but that field has just winnowed down to just a handful of survivors from that era. So how things change,
Yeah, because now Ford's not even doing it anymore, right? So it's really nobody.
We have folks in like clapped out G35s, like like just trying to carry the torch for now. Yeah.
God bless those people. Sorry, we got way of the weeds on Ford Compact Car. You were asking about it seems like you want to talk about magazine culture versus where we're at now and how the kids who are into cars get consume media and interact with other fans, right? It's kind of like, how do we get from here to there in a pretty short period of time since none of us are that old.
Yeah, I think that's a much more succinct way of doing it than what I was doing. But yes, basically, yeah. I think like what can we take from the magazine era? What was good about the magazine era is worth preserving while still moving things forward and making things accessible to a larger audience and kind of incorporating all of these subcultures that I think we're more aware of as car fans now.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. So here's how I think is that auto journalism, if you do it right, it's two kinds of things. It's a service and it's selling a fantasy. On one hand, you have the like, do I buy the BMW X3 or the Mercedes, GLC, like the very practical. Here's what you need to know because you're a normal person buyer buying a car, or you're an enthusiast who knows this stuff, and you just need some practical buying advice. And then there's I drove a Lamborghini in the south of France and wrote a beautiful 4,000 word paean about it, and like that last thing is useless to almost everybody because like no one will ever do that stuff. I've only done shit like that a couple of times myself. Like that is very much like print magazine fantasy stuff. But it's fun. It's fun to imagine. Like it's fun to just I've been that guy. You're that bored bored at your day job, and you just think like, man, I wish I could take a Lamborghini through the south of France. I think that if you're doing automotive content, I hate the word content personally, but like let's, for lack of a better term,
hashtag content.
Hashtag content. Whether it's videos or it's social posts or it's just storytelling, it generally needs to be one of those two things. I think Jalopnik specifically, I'm tooting my own horn here a little bit too, because I think that we tried very hard to stretch the boundaries, and the Drive does this now too. And they always have, but I mean, we tried to wrap this up last year. But like when I think back when I was EIC of Jalopnik and not just overseeing a network like I do now, we tried to stretch the boundaries of what an automotive publication could do. And it was, the stories weren't just about cars. So the best stories were about drugs and sex and corruption and human failure and tragedy and triumph and technology and material science and energy and just all of the things that go into cars. Like things that if you went to a dinner party with a bunch of people who don't give a shit about cars at all, if they found a story interesting, that was a worthy Jalopnik feature to us. And I think we were always trying to aim for that audience that we didn't have but wanted. And I think that's something we have to do today. If car culture is going to be relevant, like we have to be evangelists for car culture too.
Right.
And you can do that, like these big wide ranging stories or these kind of Doug videos that are really amusing. And I'm going to get to YouTube in a minute too. Or you can do it with the service side, which is, like the very practical cars.com, Auto Trader, Auto Guide, like buyer's guide stuff. I'm not dinging on that. The Drive does that too. That's very important to what we do. But it's that walking that line between the mainstream buyers who just need to know like which Subaru they should buy, and then like the people who are like us and want to talk about this stuff and want to read a dream. I think that's what has to be done to ensure this industry is survival moving forward, you know?
Yeah, I think that's a really great way to put it. And the terms that I was thinking about it were pretty similar to that. Is that like every sort of like plateau that we've gotten to with media and like its reach for as far as automotive media, it's been kind of that service thing that you've been talking about. It kind of becomes the new baseline, the new language of the service, right? And then someone figures out a way to articulate why cars matter beyond their numbers or their utility. And I think like automobile or sport compact figured out a way to tell that story beyond just like 0 to 60 times and things like that, like experience, right? And then Top Gear to, compared to like, oh God, the PBS show I'm blanking on now. You know what I'm talking about?
Motor Week, right?
Motor Week, yes.
Yeah.
So like, right. So like Top Gear has talked about like an X factor and the cool wall and all that sort of stuff. And like that there was some intangible thing with cars. And I think Jalopnik was another kind of like step up on that same trajectory.
Yeah, thank you. And I think this also, it's worth noting that just like, this is me putting my editorial director hat on of it, is just like, it's not just the mediums themselves that change, it's how they make money that's different. Okay, if you're automobile and it's like 2000 or whatever, your job is like sell ads, put ads in the magazine, then let the staff do whatever the hell they want. Go to the south of France, have adventures. Now it's like the internet makes everything quantifiable. Everything is data driven. There's data points around everything we do. We know how much traffic we get from a story about trucks. We know how much revenue we get from that traffic. We do things like, car buying tools, and we get revenue from conversions too. Like it's from getting people to use those car buying tools to buy their next Subaru or whatever. So like, I think that the way these publications make money has also changed the dynamic a little bit too. If you were to launch a business tomorrow on the digital space, it's a hell of a lot safer to just do like a very consumer focused car buying platform, car research platform, than it is to be like, get money from investors or whomever to be like, oh, what we're going to do is me and my friends are going crazy adventures. Like, that's hard to sell, and it's hard to sell ads against that, and it's hard to monetize that. Like the dynamic in this industry has changed, and I think that you've got to have a lot of different sources of your revenue in order to make publications survive today. So like, that's really boring business talk, but like that is a reason why things have changed a little bit too. Chapter doesn't have that problem because it like makes money. It's also kind of subsidized by like the British government, which can drive us nuts. We make most of our money laundering money for ISIS. I'm just kidding. I don't think that's the case. I know another publication that may be laundering money, but I'm not gonna go into what that is here.
It's not like corruption and ne'er-do-wells and cars have ever intersected in the past, Patrick. So yeah.
you'd have to ask that. I don't know. Our hands are clean. But I think that's these as technology has changed, so has what pays the bills, and we do exist in a capitalistic industry here. It's like I'm kind of really my wife just texted me. That was a really bad joke. So, that's her keeping me responsible here.
I like that you have an editor. The editor has an editor.
Yeah.
I edits the editors.
Yeah. I've got some notes.
the real boss. What was I going to say? Yeah, it's an interesting, that's what changed the dynamic here a little bit too. I'm jealous also of the guys at Hyper Trash magazine. Have you ever read Hyper Trash?
No.
Okay, look them up. They're on Instagram, and that's like, I told them this too. It's like Hyper Trash is what like Jalop or The Drive would be if like none of us had to worry about making money. It's just fun, and it's like they just do cool articles. It's like a car zine. You guys remember zines? People just like make zines in their basement and shit. Yeah, read Hyper Trash. This publication is like owns. It's so cool what they do, and it's so like liberating and free, and it's just around cool storytelling. Like their debut issues of Ferrari F40 on fire. I'm like, all right, already I'm on board with whatever you guys are doing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so like I wish all of us had that ability to do that zine energy still. Yeah. I'm not saying it's gotten too slick and corporate, but like there's realities that go into this now that didn't used to exist.
Yeah. Well, and I mean that sort of kind of dovetails with another thing that we talk about a lot on this show, which is that you can't separate car culture from culture, and where we are with just media in general. I mean, it's not a great place. My wife is a writer, so I'm painfully aware of how we value writers monetarily in this society.
I think that's a really good way to put it about not, you can't separate car culture from culture. I think I kind of know where you're going with this when you're talking about how to speak to younger generations and reaching broader audiences and making sure that like you're reaching more diverse audiences, what we want to do. Like that's a great way to put it, I think.
Yeah. Thanks. It's something that we've kind of it's a conversation that we've kind of been slowly moving towards for a while now. And just, we do this for fun, so we can just like take our sweet time getting there, which is what we've done.
Well, we never view like just a thing without any kind of context whatsoever, right? Like it's not just a Buick, right? But like all of the machinations that have created the Buick, the market that it's in, the way people perceive it. And then also all of the things about car culture that have kept other people from coming in, like all of the gatekeeping, all of the misogyny, all of the homophobia, all of the racism, like all of that stuff. Like we only get better car culture with more people, period. Right. And so until we start policing our corner of culture, our subcultures, it's not going to get any better, right? But we want to look back on it and know that we've made an effort to make car culture better,
I definitely agree. And like this is the spiel I'm about to give you on that is one I've given to many people over the years, but like we have to make this tent bigger if it's going to survive at all.
That's it.
Because when you look at the technological changes that are coming to this industry, electrification, but to a much greater degree, autonomy. These are changes that I don't think are really conducive to an enthusiastic culture. Fast electric cars, maybe, sure, but like driverless cars, like hell no. Like that is not something anyone gets excited about. This hobby, this passion, has to embrace a lot of different people. It has to embrace younger people. It has to embrace people of different gender expressions. It has to embrace more people of color if it's going to survive what's going to come. And I've seen so many times over, like people coming together over cars and bonding with one another and getting past their differences and helping their neighbors and just like forming like meaningful human connections over this. And like that will go away if we stick to just like the old, like not to get, I don't know, discriminatory against, generationally, like the baby boomer way of just like, this is the Ford Mustang meetup and this is the Chevy meetup. And I don't like these newcomers and I don't like the way you've done your car. And I don't like the way that they've modified your car. Like we've got to be open to everybody now. Right. Or this passion, this hobby, it does not have a future. I very strongly believe that.
No, I think you're totally right. And I think that there are instructive lessons from other subcultures around us, and I think the one that I think about all the time is gun culture, where like that's just a blueprint of how not to do it, right? Like how you can just get so insular and closed off from the rest of society that the rest of society just wants to take your toys away, and that's it. And there has been so many opportunities where they could have gone. I have a big thing about like, I think that guns should look like race cars. Like you can own an F1 car. You can't take it in public, but you can own one, and so gun ranges should be like racetracks, and you should be only allowed to use semi-automatic weapons like gun ranges. And that's the only place they're allowed.
I can't remember which gun publication this was. Because I grew up in Texas, I'm not really a gun guy myself, but it was a couple of years ago. One of the bigger ones, like they had like their editor-in-chief did an op-ed, I want to say after the Newtown tragedy, and was like, wrote an op-ed, was like, guys, maybe we should talk about some reasonable gun control reform. Maybe we should just start talking about some common sense things. And like he like lost his job over it because the backlash against him was so furious. And I obviously have my own opinions on that whole thing that we don't really need to go into. But I like, is that what you want out of your culture? I mean, like, is that do you want it to be? You hold certain truths to be so unassailable that they can't be critiqued, they can't be discussed, they can't be made better.
Right.
We have to reconcile with the fact that like cars like are really cool, but like we shouldn't have built society around them.
Exactly.
Like they make traffic, pollution, the way we've designed cities, the way that we have, highways have impacted people of color in American cities. Highway design and transit design is very, very, very closely linked to racism. Like we can't ignore all of the bad things that cars and commuter culture have done in this country, especially in America, where we're a country that really came of age with the automobile. Like you can't turn a blind eye to that, I don't think.
Yeah, and I think that's this. Sorry, Dave. I just want to jump on this real quick because I think this is the double-edged sword of our conversation before, of like looking back towards like of nostalgia being a garbage emotion, right?
I was just going to quote you on that, Ian. I was just going to quote you on that.
Yeah, so this is where nostalgia can be a garbage emotion, because if we go too far down the like, I remember how things used to be, we risk falling into that trap of where gun culture fell and saying like we can't accept any change,
right?
Because it's not the way it used to be, right? Yeah.
Right, and that has no future. So like, you can do that, but like don't expect to get your kids into this hobby like that you're passionate about. Don't expect, and then don't fucking complain when like there are no new enthusiast vehicles being made anymore. Like this is what you've asked for. This is how you spent your dollars. This is where your priorities are.
Yeah. I also want to go back a second too, because we were talking about the economics of media. I think there's always been like a feedback loop of like what the media is talking about and what manufacturers are making. Right. I mean, so
totally.
That's interesting to think about, and I didn't like prepare anything on this, but like it's interesting to think about how that feedback loop is affected by the differing economics of the media side. So, I mean, there's gotta be, because now the like more like, service side of the journalism is more lucrative really than before. Do you think that is starting to affect, is that part of the reason that we're seeing fewer enthusiast cars?
I don't know how much automotive media really has an impact on what people buy. I kind of feel like we're a bit of an echo chamber, and if I could yell at you to buy cars with manuals, it's not going to make any real meaningful difference. I think where it has made a difference is that if you're smart and you do what I do, you're a writer, you're an editor in this field, like you need to like get over certain things, like the brown diesel manual wagon thing. Like that's never going to happen. Anyone writing in 2021, like no manual, no care, like you need to get your head examined. Like this is just the way things are. Like sorry, like it's a lot of those ships have sailed. Like I really admire when Car and Driver did their Save the Manuals campaign, like the 2010s, but it amounted to exactly zero. Like we've all got to be a little bit more pragmatic. And I think that we've got to, I think this industry as a whole has gotten better about this in recent years, but it's like, you got to understand what buyers actually want, what normal people actually want, what average people actually want. Like you can't just be like lambasting folks for not buying a Lotus every time they need to buy a new car. And I've met auto writers who do that. And I'm like, you need a reality check, man. Like, this is just a little bit more pragmatism among our crowd of dreamers and enthusiasts will go a long way, I think.
Yeah, I just wonder if maybe because the automakers are also more aware of what keeps the lights on at some of these publications, and that it is like that people are still writing about saving the manuals, but people aren't clicking on those, right? Like that's not what's driving traffic, but the automakers also know that, right?
I mean, I don't think they care. I mean, I've had this conversation with every automaker, I think, in my entire career. It's like we don't, like you can complain that there's like not a manual on the Supra, the new one, the new Toyota Supra. Like we don't give a shit. Nobody cares. Like they don't. Probably the only one that really still I think is afraid of being labeled as like not an enthusiast company anymore is BMW, and like they will still put manuals on some of their models, although that the selection has really narrowed in recent years. Like the new M3, M4 is still a manual. I haven't driven that car yet, but like I wrote Road and Track's review of it last week, and the manual version of the new M3, M4 is not that good. Like you have this insanely high tech car, top to bottom, and you were running like, basically mid 20th century transmission technology in the name of engagement or whatever. Like it doesn't. It's just. I really think that they're just afraid of like the headlines a little bit on that, and I can't imagine how many they actually sell. That won't last forever, though.
Yeah, right. Them and probably Porsche, right? They came out with the R in response to all the used 911 prices and stuff.
Yeah. Porsche does it too. I feel like BMW, just in my travels, a bit more thin-skinned, but a little bit. I think that Porsche is a little more apt to fall back on like the lap times. Well, our customers want like the fastest car around the Nürburgring, and it's not going to be a car with a 7-speed manual. It just isn't. Right. And I tend to think of like the no manual, no care crowd. Like, hey man, like Craigslist is full of great manual cars. Like that's what I would drive, without question. But like I think it's dumb to get mad about that debate in this year and beyond. You know what's really going to kill the manual transmission for good? Like, I'll tell you if you want to know.
I mean, electrification.
Yeah. Electric cars. Yeah, it's like this is just utterly pointless. Like these are cars that do not need gears really, let alone a clutch and a stick. Like that's going to be the final nail in that concept. Like you just need to wrap your head around it, buy something cool you use that you enjoy driving, whether if it's got a stick, and drive it as long as you can. Like that's my advice to you if you're the no manual, no care crowd. But like that's ship the sales, my friend. Sorry.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I absolutely see a limited lifespan on something that speaks from an authoritarian voice versus an empathetic voice, right? And I feel
definitely agree. That's a good way to put it. Yeah,
I think that empathetic voice takes into context everything that somebody has to do in their daily life, the spectrum of ownership of individuals, right? Like Ian in his like VW R32, like yes, you only drive it, once a week, right? Whatever, you shove the kids in it when you have to, right? But you have practical car, like understanding that like nobody lives at the track, nobody like wants to be so goddamn hardcore every moment of their day, right? You're not going to take away my enthusiast card because I have an automatic transmission on my sedan, like it's perfectly fine, right? So like stop. I don't want to listen to an authoritarian voice, right? I want somebody to be empathetic to my situations and speak from the heart, right?
Yeah, I think that's true of everything. Like I've never loved people that have 100% across the board moral certitude about everything they say and believe. Like that's not really a great way to go through life,
Right?
Yes.
No,
absolutely.
I don't know. Like I looking back on like Clarkson. Like I appreciate Jeremy Clarkson in a certain context, right? Like a little bit of a bubble, but like all I hear now is like somebody yelling at me that I'm doing something wrong, right?
Yeah, a lot of that stuff hasn't aged well. Go back and watch Top Gear now. It's a lot of that stuff from the 2000s. It's just like it was a lot of the cheerful jingoism that they did. I don't think it's aged great in the era of Brexit and everything else that's happened in recent years. Like it just has a bit of a different undertone to it now. But I think you're right. It's like again, the guiding principle we have, at least where I work, is write for the audience you want, not the one you have. And one of my favorite compliments that we used to get at Jalopnik is we would do a thing where we would share our stories across the Gawker Gizmodo network.
Yeah.
Jalopnik stories would go to Deadspin, whatever. I'm like no shit. Like readers would email us, be like, I came into your stories because I saw it on Jezebel, and I started reading it more because I liked the writing and I thought it was funny. And I just bought a manual transmission car. I bought my first fun car instead of my Honda Civic, and like you turned me into someone who like cares about driving, cares about fun. Then we got that a lot. And I was like, that's the people I want to go after. I want to convert people. I want to be a bit of an evangelist, like the empathetic voice who's like, hey,
you can.
It doesn't have to suck if you don't want it to.
Right?
We can help you with that if you want.
Right? You don't have
That's
to
awesome.
Look at this as an appliance, right? This is not a toaster that you're spending $30,000 on, right? Like, yeah, right? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like I would be remiss if I left out a piece of like print media that's always made a huge impact on me, and it's absolutely 1,000% the photography. The photography in print media has been something that has stuck with me since I was a kid. Like I can think about car magazines, like very specific R34 Skyline pictures, right? Like the exact picture that one of their photographers took as the wheel was turning, and like just the beautiful expression that like that they're able to convey through photography, right? And the online presence, like with everything that we have now, like it's really hit and miss. Like like it's there's the documentary aspect of it, but then there's the like more artistic side that we get in little bits. So like if we're talking about things that like we want to carry forward, or things from print media that need to be kind of like to be carried into this new era, like the artistic expression and the photography is something that is so huge and so critical to me.
No, you're right, and like I'm happy to speak to that for sure. Like I'm also a garbage photographer myself. If you ever read a Patrick Retorts review, if the pictures were good, it's because Griffin Lee shot those photos, or I got lucky that day, which is really rare. But I remember when I was coming up in newspapers, when I was the Metro reporter, like we had a whole staff of photographers, good paying jobs. And like just some of the best and most talented people I've ever worked with, some of the bravest journalists I've ever worked with. Like you can go to a house fire, you can stand back and talk to cops, as I did. But like the people who were getting up and could feel the heat of the flames from their face, those are your shooters. And those are the people you win the battle with. And like when times got tough in print media, and they're still tough today, like they were often the first thing to get cut. Because some suit says, okay, well, take a photo with your cell phone, or we laid off the photo staff and we bought 3 Sony point and shoots, just use those instead, and they look like garbage. You're a
photojournalist now.
yeah, exactly. Like on top, yes, you're also not getting paid more to do this. You're doing this on top of your existing job, because deal with it, and that has caused, I think. And this is very true in cars too, and on the blogosphere as well. I don't say that anymore. Okay, on websites as well, the photography quality there is just not what it used to be, and it's an economic reality thing. Unfortunately, It's like, okay, cool. So when I was running Jalopnik, and I had like direct command over our freelance budget in the course of a month. Like I could pay a really brilliant photographer $3,000 to shoot one car, and it would be this beautiful spread. Or I could buy 5 or 6 freelance features with that same amount of money too. And I know which one I'm getting more ROI out of. It's going to be buying the stories. And like that, the photos look cool, but like convincing the suits, like this is something that was worth spending money over when it's not necessarily a revenue driver. That's tricky. That's a challenge. So like, yes, I sincerely believe in, the power of great photos and great photojournalism in cars and everywhere else. That's one of my favorite car culture sites is still Speed Hunters. I read Speed Hunters a couple times a week. I think they still do it better than anybody else. And they still believe in that power of a visual medium. Like you will never see a bad photo post on Speed Hunters. But like that's just not the case everywhere. When like it's tough. Like if you want to be a good shooter in cars, you're probably a writer who bought a camera set with your own money. You probably taught yourself how to do it, and you probably learned by doing, and maybe traded to some other photographers. Or you're like one of these like super badass folks like Larry Chen, or somebody who has like corporate clients, and like you're like good enough to do this as like your job. And like that's hard to come by, and like those people tell you those gigs are really tough to get. Not everybody can be Larry Chen, even if you're like a badass at this field. Like would that we could be, but like that's a hard thing to nail down,
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I think also, I know I'm the person who like 5 minutes ago said that nostalgia is a garbage emotion, but I think there's also something to be said for having the tangible photograph in your hand.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever saved like a magazine, an online magazine story for the photo. I've seen amazing photos online, but I don't hang on to them, but I have like 15-year-old car magazines around,
Right.
I don't know. It's a little bit different, but
it is. And I mean, it's one pet peeve I have with reviews. This is verboten at the drive is like, most of the time it's verboten. Sometimes it still slips through. But like these automakers, when you go to press launch, you go to Portimao or something like that. They will give you like photos, like a thumb drive or a website full of photos that their shooter has taken. They're really good, high quality photos. But then guess what? You end up with the same photos in your article that like 35 other outlets have. It looks like crap. And like I've done that because again, like their photos are better than what I can shoot as a rec. I'm not a great shooter, but like that's the trade-off is then sameness, and you even see this in magazines now, like during Car and Driver, like you see tons of stock photos. You see it in Road and Track too. Like getting high quality original photography is a lot tougher than it was in the print era. And I think that's something that we have sadly really lost in recent years,
Well, I think that's probably going back to kind of my previous question of like the power dynamic between automakers and media is like way out of whack now, where I think, before automakers probably used to be a little more scared of journalists and were maybe a little more respectful of them, right?
I don't know about that.
Even in the magazine era?
Maybe. You got to realize this is a very access-driven form of journalism. Right. I mean, like 90% of it is just rewriting PR. If along a lot of outlets, like doing it adversarially, like Jalopnik did, like The Drive does, like that's fairly rare. Like something that's gonna like you're talking about adversarial journalism. You're talking about holding power to account. And these are very powerful car companies. These like Elon Musk can tweet something and it will shift global financial markets. That is power.
That's true.
And like being critical of things like that, being critical of how General Motors runs its company or its role in the Flint water crisis, like we once did a story on. That means you lose access. You lose press cars. You lose opportunities to go on trips. You lose things. You lose, the people don't talk to you. And like that, not there. I think a lot of forms of journalism, whether you're covering the White House or covering business, there's degrees of access. But auto journalism in particular is a field where that is expected to be the norm. If you go against that grain, you will pay for it, or you'll lose chances to get things. And like the best, like you can be the friendliest writer on earth, and that's how you're going to get tons of opportunities. But it's not going to be something that's meaningful. It's just going to be marketing copy.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Yeah.
I'm thankful for the democratization though, because regular car reviews, right? Doug DeMuro, right? These people that like are certainly on opposite ends of like the YouTube car content spectrum, right? They found their voice like not operating within that access-based model, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right, and because they have a platform that can reach so many people, like they can feed this like continuous beast of regular car reviews just got their first press car like 2 weeks ago, right?
Right. It's funny. Oh my God. Like I've known Brian for years, and like I remember when they first starting out, the fact they're getting press cars now is hysterical to me. So
right. Yeah, the fact that Ian and I got press cars before regular car reviews with our 143 YouTube subscribers, right? Just because we showed up to the press event, right? I mean that's something is very wrong there because we're nowhere nearly as creative as him.
No, it's funny, but like I'm glad you kind of brought that up. It's a good segue because when you want to talk about where car culture has shifted to, it's YouTube. It is.
Yeah.
Like that's where it's gone the last like 5, 6, maybe 7 years. And I remember being EIC of Jalopnik, especially when we were owned by a company called Univision, the big old school TV magnate. And I was on their ass. I'm like, guys, we got to be doing more on YouTube. Like this is where it's going. Like we need to be a YouTube first video operation here. And I was like, no, like I had endless fights from the corporate side to get back to the business realities of what we do. It's like, we want to prioritize our like on-site player because we can charge more expensive ads that way. I'm like, okay, well, you can't share that video to forums to whatever, and it's not in the YouTube algorithm.
Yeah,
you get on YouTube and you start clicking through videos, and then you're there for 6 hours or whatever.
Right.
So we Jalopnik missed out on that for a long time. I can't speak to the operation now because I worked there about 2 years, but like I don't know if they ever got back to that. Like we missed the YouTube bandwagon. And that's one thing that's really cool about where I work now which is the Drive, and Flash Drive is still a really widely recognized YouTube channel for cars. I would argue that the Drive is often seen as a video first brand. And last year we had really ambitious plans to bring back that channel in some big ways, and then some stuff happened around March of last year in America that have
impacted people getting together to collaboratively work in spaces on projects.
Yeah, all of a sudden it was a little trickier to send Chris Harris to drift Ferraris in south of France or whatever than it was, a few months ago. So like that's a work in progress for me and Mike Stelly. It's like a big thing we still believe in is like getting that channel to be the king like it was once. But like that is where YouTube has that's where car culture's gone. And you're right, it is democratized. But there's a trade-off with that too, and I think Doug also, if you haven't had him on a podcast, you should get him on there. Doug will talk about this because the YouTube beast is a beast that must be fed, and that is scary shit. That is just constant production, constant
heroin,
gaming the algorithm. Yes, all the time. Like, I remember when Freddie Hernandez switched that to, he became primarily YouTube. He was like, you have to be doing this all of the time, or you will lose followers. You will not be as highlighted in the algorithm. Like it is a nasty thing to be a master to. And like, I had moments like in my career, it's just pivot to being a YouTuber. I'm like, hey, I'm not that interesting on camera, like obviously, but like, I don't want to be feeding that beast all the time. That's scary as hell. So it is democratized, but like you're trusting a Google owned algorithm with your future and your fame. Right. And that's a tricky proposition too.
Right.
Yeah, and that's changed a lot over the years, even just since the inside of the YouTube era. I mean, like I think now of like, I mean, I love Mighty Car Mods.
Yeah,
that would not happen now. Like those guys would not have made it because they were doing it as like a side project, like a couple of weekends a month sort of thing. Mm-hmm. It was not at the sort of pace that everyone else puts out videos. There's no way that they would be where they are now if they started now,
Yeah. And the revenue's not there like it used to be. Like it's a lot hard to make your money doing that. Like it's YouTube has kind of tightened the faucet in recent years, whether you're trying to be the next Jake Paul, which God forbid you should absolutely not try and be the next Jake Paul.
please don't, everyone.
Or if you're doing cars, like the reason the Drive was Flash Drive is because it was YouTube. YouTube gave them a grant early on to make a car channel. YouTube.com/Drive. That's where the Flash comes from. And they had like this was definitely before my time working for this company, but like I think they had a revenue sharing agreement or some kind. But anyway, they were financially incentivized, underwritten some degree by YouTube to make car content on YouTube. That doesn't exist anymore. Right. And like that was why they tried to pivot to a subscription-based model, which didn't go super great for them, if you remember that from about 5 or 6 years ago. But like it's a lot. And like again, if you want to send Chris Harris to a racetrack to drift an F50, like that costs money. That's time and it's fuel and it's plane costs and it's food and it's feeding the crew and it's equipment. This is not a cheap venture making good video. Like and if you're not getting that revenue from YouTube to do it, to just maybe break even, what's the point?
Yeah. And it's not a thing that
you're not going to shoot it on. You're also not going to shoot it on Tuesday and upload it on Wednesday. Like it's also a long production cycle, which is not what they do.
That's why like the greatest genius in this business was Matt Farah, figuring out the one take setup. Yeah. I'm like this. I hate Matt forever. He's a good friend of mine, but like he came up with this one thing that I wish I had come up with because it's brilliant. You just set the camera, do it in one take. Maybe there's a little bit of editing, but it's like one and done, and it's super easily repeatable, minimal lift. He already obviously had a platform before he started doing that stuff too, but like it's tricky to pull off those kinds of repeats. And like I think that the YouTube viewers, they want the beautiful cinematography. They want all that stuff. Savage Geese does great at that too, but there's a reason he doesn't crank out, 9 videos a week. How can you,
Yeah. Right. I just want to make pretty stuff, right? We're so far in the red for like just our crappy videos that like it's not even funny. We're never going to see that money come back, but that's okay, right? Like I just want to make pretty things, like, and that's I
was going to say you should do the Apex adjacent business model, which is release like 2 videos a year, and they're middling quality and are expensive.
Yeah. I mean, that's actually closer to a lot of big media car outlet video strategies than you might think, my friend. Let me tell you.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to get back to print media at all, but like it's really coincidental that my good friend Sam, noted Fiat aficionado, just sent me a magazine in the mail today. He shipped it to me in if we're talking, time eras, he shipped it to me in an LP box. So I thought I was getting a record from my friend Sam, but he actually sent me this. Have you heard of this Linkage magazine?
Linkage? I have not heard of it, but I will definitely look it up now. What's in it?
It's beautiful. It seems like all of the kinds of things that you want to look at in print car media. I don't know. I haven't really dug into it yet, but just leafing through it, this makes me feel like I'm looking at magazines at Barnes and Noble, late at night, right when I'm like 19 again. There's a Lancia Stratos in here.
It's okay. It's really hard to pronounce Lancia if you're an American. It's just a tricky word. You're fine.
And
I make a mistake all the time.
Yeah. Lots of stripes.
No, but you're right. That seems to be where, and I can't speak authoritatively. This is I actually never worked in magazines. I was a newspaper guy, and then I went to digital. That was the one thing I sort of somehow missed out on. But that seems to be one of the big places that car magazines are going. It's like these big, maybe quarterly, splashy, more expensive, thick, nice paper, almost like a coffee table book, beautiful photography.
Look at the ad on the back. I mean, right?
Yeah, Road Rat, R&T is leaning big into that. Like they've stopped being monthly, and then 8 times or 10 times a year they're doing that now. Like that seems to be like the economics aren't what they used to be. Right. So we're going to charge you a little bit more, and you're going to have like a keepsake forever. That's like a super high quality like book almost for enthusiasts. And I admire the folks who are trying that. I'm eager to see how that pans out, and if it can really find a mass audience enough to like make this a viable venture. Yeah.
Well, and I think that's also like the best case scenario for cars in general, sort of, is like, and this is something we've talked about for years too, is cars kind of going the vinyl route.
I was just going to mention that.
We're going to have our iPod for our everyday thing. You're going to have your MP3s that you listen to in your car, but you're also going to have that copy. You're also going to have that music on vinyl, and that's the special thing. Hopefully, we'll get to a place where it's all electrified mass transit, and then we can preserve some sort of fun thing that we can touch and wrench on and drive for the weekends, and we can get away from commuter culture, which is garbage.
That's a great way to put it. I'm glad you're making the distinction between car culture and commuter culture. Because a lot of critics of cars, even though I actually agree with a lot of those criticisms, they don't make that distinction.
Yes.
And car culture is like you and your buddies like getting together and like working on your Datsuns and going for a fun drive. Like commuter culture is you and in your RAV4 like having a 90-minute commute to work every day in mostly stop and go traffic, and like that sucks. I hate that too. It's objectively terrible. Who wants to live like that?
Yeah. It also means that if you're doing that, you're not driving. Right? Like you can't drive because there's too many people around.
Yeah. And I mean, like some people liken that to like, oh, cars would be like horses, the thing you do as pleasure. And yeah, maybe. But I think that the thing to remember is that despite what Elon Musk and a bunch of tech startups will tell you, I think that autonomous driving is a lot further off than people would have you believe. Like a lot further off. Like AI isn't there. The sensor tech isn't there. We're working on it. It's better than it was 10 years ago, but like, it's just, I'd be shocked if we had true, fully safe driverless cars in any of our lifetimes. I would be very surprised about that.
It's like a complete boondoggle. And I have a little bit of a perspective on this because I in the industry that I work in, I'm a network engineer, and this has been a big thing in IT is automating IT systems.
Yes.
And there's always been like this constant cycle of someone coming out with some like ocean boiling technology that's gonna that's gonna solve everybody's problem, and it's gonna completely automate everybody's network. Mm-hmm. And then they find out that everyone's network is hot garbage and you can't automate it. And so they narrow it down. And it's like, well, then they start defining use cases. And that's what autonomous cars has not done, right? Like there's not a whole lot of conversation about, like, in popular media anyway, of like, we have to really narrow down use cases of what driving is, because driving as we know it today is horrendously complicated and like all sorts of crazy situations, you know?
Mm-hmm. It's the human brain is an underrated thing, man. Like it's a beautiful thing, and it's more complicated, and it's more capable and more powerful than we and the technologists in the future tend to give it credit for, I think.
Yeah.
There's also a problem with autonomous cars that it's an idea in search of a business model. Is that no one has really figured out how to make this work. Like it's like maybe ideally we have networks of just various on-demand robot cars roving the cities that you just order up like a robot Uber, whatever you need. Okay, cool. What about the rest of the country? What if you're not in like a city center? What I guess we just have privately owned vehicles that can navigate highways really well, like super cruise. I don't know. Like I don't think anyone has figured that out. I also think the pandemic has set that back a little bit, that idea. Like I think a lot of us are a little less apt to get into car sharing than we were a year and a half ago. Maybe that'll change eventually, but I think it's kind of like that whole industry sort of retrenched when pandemic. And I don't think it's really found quite a way forward yet. I mean, what I will say is like the way I try to approach this as an editor in charge of car publications is I've been very excited and bullish on electric cars and very skeptical of autonomous cars.
Yeah.
And in both cases, I think I've been proven fairly right. And that's kind of how, that's how I'd like to look at the future. I'm really excited about EVs. I believe in climate change. I believe climate change is real. Some of the EVs I've driven lately are fast as hell and a lot of fun. And like, I'm excited to see what happens there. But like, I'm really like, we just need 5 more years and we'll have driverless cars. Like, yeah, sure, Elon, whatever you say now, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I completely agree with that assessment. And I think as far as like a business model for autonomous vehicles, I think that it would take somebody pouring, maybe hundreds of billions of dollars into developing some sort of car to car and car to infrastructure technology that they could then license to everybody, but everyone would have to agree to do it and nobody's gonna
agree on anything. We can't agree that water's wet. Like,
it's just, we can't agree on EV charging standards, right?
Yeah, my God, yeah.
Right. So like a standard communication set and data storage and data handling and everything else worldwide, it's just not going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
We couldn't do that in a city, in a municipality, let alone, country, nation, continent wide.
And the stakes are just so incredibly high. It's like I said, it's a boondoggle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the charging thing it is insanely frustrating. Like I'm in upstate New York, and it's like, what like garbage filled snow covered charge point station that may or may not work this week am I going to use to charge my EV that I could park it overnight like 20 minutes from my house? Yeah. Like I want to get a home charger for our house up here at some point, but I'm not there yet. But like I remember like it was a few years ago when BMW was launching the electric Mini Cooper. They did it at the Formula E race in Brooklyn in 2019, I guess. Who the hell? It's 500 years ago. It's what is time anymore, right?
It means nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, and they were like, we're aiming this Mini Cooper at young urban city dwellers, and I'm like, where are you supposed to charge this thing? I was like, well, you charge it at your office. You get your employer to add charging stations at your office. I was like, dude, I live in New York City. Like, I maybe drive a car once a week to go grocery shop, and I'm supposed to drive this to my office and park it where and get my employer to pay for electric charging. And they just the German engineers just kind of looked at me like, well, figure it out. I don't know. It's like we'll make the battery powered cars. The rest is your problem, and screw you.
Right.
And like that's it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Screw you for asking about it. Yeah.
It is, and like I have plenty of criticisms of Elon Musk and of Tesla. Like I have to give them infinite credit for building out the supercharger network and making it free for a long time. It was the smartest thing they ever did.
Yeah.
It spurred adoption not just of their electric cars, but of EVs in general. Now, how do I wish they made it universal and that any e-bike could charge it at a supercharger station? Yeah, absolutely. But like doing that was a massive stroke. They deserve a lot of credit for that.
Yeah.
But that's also very frustrating. Now, I agree with you that they deserve credit for it. But now it's frustrating because it seems to me like that's a pretty good business model of just licensing it to car makers who could then just pass that cost on as even just an add-on license to their customers. Because the plug itself is not the problem. It's the software, right? So
yeah,
they could easily license that, you would think, to other car makers for a pretty hefty fee, and car makers would pay it because they'll just pass it on.
Yeah, because absolutely none of them want to invest in the charging infrastructure in what I would consider a meaningful way. Like there's Volkswagen doing Electrify America, and like they're doing that because they have to, because like the United States government is making them do that because they cheated with diesel engines. Like if that hadn't happened, none of this crap would be happening with VW. But like I think they have these partnerships, these third party networks that are really half-assed, and it's a joke. And it's, I think that America's charging network now, and I think in the immediate term, does not in any way match the high electric ambitions that these automakers have. Like these crappy charge point stations. And sorry to dump on charge point all the time, but that's what I have up here. They all suck. I'm supposed to charge my $100,000 crab walking like Hummer electric truck that can drive itself almost. It's supposed to charge there. Like, how is that appealing? That's terrible. You know?
Yeah. There's one by my house that I think it's also a charge point that's by a Walgreens, and it's just always piled super. Every time I see it, piled high with doggy poo bags.
Yeah,
it's hilarious.
Yeah, I hope someone listens to Apex and Jason who works at charge points, but like just like
nobody does.
Your product's a joke, y'all. Like, it's terrible. Like, do better, man. I need to just rail on these people on the blogs more, because like it's not what it needs to be. It's a shame, because like I said, I'm a believer in electric cars, and I want this technology to catch on. I want us to wean ourselves more off of fossil fuels with our cars, and like this is not making it easy to do that.
No, it's like we've driven Nissan Leafs at press events, and we recommend those to everyone. I have a friend of mine who actually his wife bought one because we had Ian and I had such a hilarious time tooling around on high efficiency tires in a Nissan Leaf.
So many tire noises. It was great.
Yeah, it's hilarious and fun, and the e-pedal, the 1 foot driving, is amazing.
Yeah.
We love it. We love it. Yeah.
It's great. It's great for cornering to turn on the 1 pedal driving, just lift off, and it brakes hard on its own, and you can modulate the throttle going into a corner. I had a Volkswagen ID4 earlier this year, which I liked, but I thought it was a little half baked. It probably needed about 6 to 8 more months of development. And I just had a Mustang Mach-E I was testing with, I loved. And I was like, holy crap, this thing actually owns, it kind of drives like a Mustang, just a very different one. But I was looking at leasing one of those when I was specking out a lease price on a Mach-E, which I don't often do when I turn a press car anymore.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Nice. This seems great.
Your conversion rate's low. They got you on that one. Yeah.
They did. It's usually you gotta. These days, the only thing that gets me anymore is the really weird stuff. And I was then I drove the Mach-E. I was like, yeah, okay, I get it. I get why Matt Farah bought one, certainly. You know.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Nice.
I do before we have to wrap up. I want to play a game of FMK cars with you.
Yes.
Dave, do you want to explain it?
Yes, FMK Cars is the game that we play on the show. It's based on the classic game of Fuck, Marry, Kill, but since we're not disgusting individuals, we don't play it with people, we play it with cars. So we're going to give you 3. You're going to choose FMK. F means you drive it for a day. M means you marry it, it's your daily driver. K means you have to crush the car. So
right.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. So
gotcha. We're tracking.
Okay.
All right.
Ian's going to give you 3, and we're going to go from there.
All right. So this one's called "It's Good to Be the King." Cars from the front page of the Drive or Car Bibles right now,
Cars
with an
Bible.
editorial twist. So there's going to be a twist with each one of these. All right. Okay. So the first one, a Lotus Elise. So you had a story about Lotus selling off the tooling for the Elise.
Yes. Yeah.
The catch with this one is that none of your freelancers will hit their deadlines.
Oh, God damn it.
you hit him right where it hurts out of the gate, Ian.
Okay. We got to get him a good car to bed.
That's an impossible choice. How could I make that happen?
All right.
Okay.
So the next one.
Do I have to give you an answer now, or do I?
No.
We'll
hear all of them. Yeah. Hear all of them, and then
okay.
you do FMK to one each one. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So the next one, 2021 Ford Bronco. None of your staff writers or freelancers will ever spell a source's name incorrectly. So there will be no copy editing like fatal errors in any articles, essentially.
Impossible, but thanks anyway. Yeah, keep going.
But that's what you get with the Bronco.
Right.
All right. So the last one, 2021 Karma GS6L. Your websites are all now Google Docs style publications, so the public can watch your writers compose their blogs in real time.
Man, this is a really difficult choice to make here. Okay.
What was that last one, Ian?
Yeah, it's the kind of like continuation of the Fisker. It's like they bought the IP of the Fisker and they're gonna like kind of redo it.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah,
it's like the fourth iteration of this or whatever.
It's like the fourth iteration, and like also like Fisker is also back, but it's not that. It's like you have the Fisker and you have the Karma, but the Fisker Karma doesn't. I don't know. It's weird anyway.
Gotcha.
Okay, cool. So so of those 3 insanely difficult choices, I have to pick one. That's how this works.
You pick one to drive for a day, and then you have to live with that catch for a day. You pick one to marry, which is your daily driver, and you live with the catch for the rest of your life. And then K, you kill one of them, and you don't have to drive the car or live with the catch.
Okay, I got to follow my heart here, and I would say that I would daily drive the Lotus, even though this means that none of my writers ever hit deadline ever again, and that'll just incentivize me to get a real job. Okay, fine. That's fine.
I love it because you're either going to die in a ball of fire from the Lotus or just self-immolate from stress.
Yeah.
Or someone will fire me. Yeah, one of the two. So, but either way, I have a Lotus, which rad, you know?
Yes. Okay.
Absolutely. Okay. So then, yeah, F and kill the Ford Bronco and the Karma. And what was the catch with the Karma again, Ian?
The websites are all like Google Docs style now. So basically you
watch
I'd F the Karma. So you drive it for a day, right?
Yep.
And then for one day, everyone gets to see us compose the stories in Google Docs. That'd be a fun one-day experiment. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. This unfortunately means we must kill the Bronco, and I'm sad to do this because I actually really like the new Bronco. I haven't driven it yet, but I think the car's really cool. This is nothing against the Bronco. It just ends up in third place because of circumstances, and R.I.P. bud. Sorry I couldn't treat you better.
I do love that you crushed the only car that made your life at work easier.
Yeah, no, that's right.
I think that's telling. That's a
good point because we subsisted on like Bronco spy shots at 2 publications I've run now for like a couple of years. Like that's just like that underwrote the entire program otherwise. So yeah, I'm really eating my own children with this one. But
not only that, but the catch was that your freelancers don't make any errors.
Well, that's what I'm for.
Yeah.
So if I did, I'd be getting myself out of a job, I guess.
Okay.
So.
All right, fair enough.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's good.
Some good test, gentlemen. There's some difficult choices there.
Well, that means we did our jobs, for which we're paid handsomely. Well, I think this was delightful. I think we did a whole car show. We did a whole show about cars. I did want to mention before we leave that because we talked about your video forays in Jalopnik. I love Carguments.
No, thank you. That was fun to do. Yeah,
I was a big fan of those.
Thanks so much. Appreciate that. That was another one. It was like, what can we do? Because we're based in New York City, that's easily repeatable and is not going to be just like we have to spend 5 days out in the field, like lovingly. So let's just film us yelling at each other, which we did anyway, in the course of our day, and it was a lot of fun. So I miss that era of things,
Yeah, those were fantastic. But this was delightful. Thank you so much for coming on, Patrick. We will have to have you back on at some point.
Ian and Dave, this was my pleasure. I would love to be back anytime. Let's do this again soon. Thank you so much for having me on, gentlemen, and have a good one.
All right, you too. Thank you,
Patrick.
Bye.
Take care.